We're going to begin with this. Anthony, the news hasn't changed much since you left. We're still talking about coronavirus and new evidence that the coronavirus pandemic is running rampant in many parts of this country. The total number of cases reported across the U.S. has reached 3.3 million. Now, that includes more than 190,000 over the weekend alone. More states and cities are urging people to wear your mask in public. Even President Trump wore one when he visited Walter Reed Medical Center on Saturday.
Florida reported more than 15,000 new cases yesterday. That shatters the one-day record for any state and continues a dramatic jump in infections there. Nearly 20% of all COVID tests in Florida have been positive over the past 7 days. Our lead national correspondent, David Begnaud, is in Orlando. David, this is as bad as we've seen it.
Yeah, Anthony, look, within the last 24 hours, there were 7,500 people hospitalized with coronavirus statewide. That's about 550 more people than we saw hospitalized on Friday night. Down in Miami, the ICUs are near capacity, not quite there. Here in Orange County, where Disney World is based, by the way, the test positivity rate is nearly 13%. Now, remember, the experts say it should be near 5% before businesses and governments reopen. But Disney World is opening anyway. They did this weekend, and this is what it looked like.
For the health and safety of everyone.
As New York City works to slow the spread of COVID-19 in the hopes of soon fully reopening, Mayor Bill de Blasio has banned all large public gatherings, except for Black Lives Matter protests.
We understand at this moment in history, people are talking about the need for historic changes. This is a historic moment of change. We have to respect that.
Big crowds at any protest you would think would be a perfect recipe for spreading COVID-19. However, mainstream media would have you believe otherwise. They say that protests are not causing the spread of the coronavirus, whereas Trump rallies, they seem to indicate, do.
Massive protests in New York City and around the country. Some doctors warned a spike in coronavirus cases could follow, but that didn't really happen.
A new study suggests that recent Black Lives Matter protesters have not led, or the protests themselves have not led to a spike in new cases.
Health officials warned against the rally, but President Trump said we have to move on.
This is all a little bit odd. It's unclear why the virus would seem to have a political bias, favoring some big gatherings over others. Mayor de Blasio's efforts to sit on both sides of the fence, accommodating those afraid of COVID-19 by implementing harsh measures on the one hand, while letting Black Lives Matter do their thing on the other hand, doesn't seem to be working out very well for him. His critics argue that the black community, which has been disproportionately hit by COVID-19, should be discouraged, not encouraged, to protest. They even point to the First Amendment.
Let me get this right, Mayor de Blasio. Fairs, parades, tennis matches banned for public safety. Mayor, statistically, the group disproportionately affected by the virus is accepted and allowed to congregate and protest. You advocate exposing them to increased risk. Hypocrite.
How does that make any sense? I'm all for BLM protests, but if they can proceed, so can other events. Viruses don't care about social conflicts.
Bill, saying that BLM protests are okay, but other gatherings are prohibited, sounds like censorship to me. This type of speech or assembly is okay, but that kind isn't.
Let's remember that New York City's mayor, Bill de Blasio, presents himself as a big supporter of Black Lives Matter. He even painted the words Black Lives Matter on the street in front of Trump Tower. That was a symbolic move that not all locals were happy with.
This mayor is promoting division and hatred, and he did this because he hates the president, and he did it out of spite. But we have a mayor who doesn't care about you, me, the African-American community. He lets them rot on the street. He's done nothing to help them.
I think it's a joke. It's beautiful, but he's trying to play both sides of everything. He won't pass no reforms or nothing. This is like hand this. The statue, all that is a joke.
It doesn't help their cause. It doesn't help their power.
Mayor Bill de Blasio seems to be in a pretty rough spot. His attempt to sit in two chairs has got a lot of other people standing up in anger. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.
Oh, this is appalling. They're messing. The president and his administration are messing with the health of our children. It is We all want our children to go back to school. Teachers do, parents do, and children do. But they must go back safely. Going back to school presents the biggest risk for the spread of the coronavirus. They ignore science and they ignore governance in order to make this happen.
They've got the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, talking about how Betsy DeVos and the White House would like to open up the schools for the fall, make sure that all the kids are in the desks. Will that happen? Let's bring in Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary. She joins us from the North Lawn, where it looks like it's a beautiful day in our nation's capital. Kayleigh, good morning to you.
Good to join you, Steve.
So are you and the administration ignoring science just in a rush to get people back into the schools and not looking at the data?
Not at all. The only one who appears to not be looking at the data is Nancy Pelosi, because just last week you heard Dr. Redfield say that children are not spreading this, that children are not affected the way that we see adults being affected. That he's the CDC director and said that during a press conference. So she appears to not be looking at the data or the science. And the only one messing with our children is Nancy Pelosi herself, because there are grave consequences for schools staying shut down, 55% reduction in abuse reporting in a state like Massachusetts when schools shut down, and all across the nation we've seen this. We depend on our teachers, we depend on our schools, and they need to reopen, and the president's been unmistakable on that.
Kayleigh, I've been looking at the CDC guidelines as a former teacher, and I can tell you that a lot of the guidelines just won't be practically applicable in classrooms. It's not going to work. Can you give any insight as to what the Trump administration's guidelines, which may differ from the CDC guidelines, will look like?
So we leave it to localities as to exactly what guidelines work, because guidelines in a state like North Dakota need to look different than in a locality like Miami.
Roger Stone was treated horribly. Roger Stone was treated very unfairly. Roger Stone was brought into this witch hunt, this whole political witch hunt.
President Trump defending his decision to commute the prison sentence of his longtime friend and advisor, Roger Stone. This comes as the president faces blowback from both parties over the move. Joining us now is John Bussey, an associate editor at the Wall Street Journal and a Fox News contributor. John, good to see you. I talked to a lot of people over the past few days who know both the president and Roger Stone. I get the sense that there was no way, no how that the president was ever going to let Stone go to jail. But why do you think it was a commutation and not a pardon in this case?
Well, the president had signaled that he was going to do something kind of early on. This was a friend of his. His friend had protected him in his own testimony. And the president signaled that, he felt that he was unjustly prosecuted and he was going to take care of him. The pardon would have essentially exonerated the felony conviction. This allows Roger Stone to continue the appeal. Hard to say whether or not whether he's going to do that or not. So it's going to cost him a lot of money to clear his name or to attempt to clear his name. He's going to have a hard time doing that. This is a charge and a conviction that even the Attorney General Barr has said was, in his own words, righteous.
As you know, coronavirus cases and hospitalizations are spiking, and that is happening across the nation as states continue to struggle to combat COVID-19. Yet President Trump and White House officials appear to be focusing on discrediting Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease expert, a doctor that President George W. Bush once called his hero. This comes as Dr. Fauci speaks out about the pandemic's growing threats. Trade advisor Peter Navarro tells CBS News Dr. Fauci has a good bedside manner with the public, but he has been wrong about everything I have ever interacted with him on. That is the well-known doctor. Oh, no, he's not a doctor, Peter Navarro. He's a economic analyst. So we're going to talk to Weijia Jiang about this. But Anne-Marie, it strikes me as interesting that now the president of the United States, and I want to talk to Weijia about, there is Weijia. We weren't sure if we had Weijia. Yeah. Weijia is following all the developments from the White House. And Weijia, I was going to ask you about targeting Dr. Fauci and the president of the United States retweeting the former host of Love Connection as some kind of an expert, as opposed to Dr.